The Leftovers, episode 3 is over, but we're just getting started here on Post Show Recaps. I'm Josh Wigler, and I'm joined here by a man whose face I never want to punch, but I always want to bathe him. It's Antonio Mazzaro. Antonio, how are you, my friend?
I am in the mood to accept many baths, so we're in good shape.
Well, this is a video podcast for the people who are watching live, so we do have some water that's warming up right now, and at the end of this podcast, we're both just going to be taking baths.
Yeah, I mean, and I understand Rob was. I understand we've having some YouTube channel issues on some of our sister sites, so we'll probably try to get this channel taken down for censorship reasons.
Yeah, I think that seems like the right thing to do.
Yeah,
Okay,
I mean
well,
solidarity.
before we get there, why don't we talk about what I think was by far and away the best episode of The Leftovers yet? I'm seeing a little bit of noise online that disagrees with that, but I was pretty riveted by the story of Reverend Matt. I liked last week's episode. I liked the premiere. This is the episode I came closest to loving. I really liked this character. I liked the journey he was on. It was intense. It was sad, and above all, it was focused. And I really appreciated that. Antonio, I'd like to get your thoughts on what you thought of Two Boats and a Helicopter, tonight's episode.
Yeah, riveting is exactly the word that comes to my mind. I felt like a rivet. I felt like whatever it is that gets riveted. That's what I felt like through the majority of the episode. Did I hope for some of the outcomes that I saw? Absolutely. Did I feel like, I knew some things were going to happen that ended up happening? Yes. That didn't do anything to change how I felt during this episode. I was pretty rapt, and like you, I felt this was the best of the series.
So we are live here on Post Show Recaps. If you're listening to the audio archives, we are not live. That means you are listening to us probably tomorrow. But if you are watching us live, we'd love to take your questions. You can send them our way. Hashtag PS Recaps. You can tweet them to Antonio and I at AZMazzaro, Mazzaro, and I am at Round Howard, like Ron Howard, but Rounder. We'd love to hear from you guys and hear what you thought of tonight's episode. Antonio, where do you want to start? You said you had a theory for the title of this episode, Two Boats and a Helicopter, and I'm a doofus, and it went completely over my head. What do you think the name of this episode means?
Well, it's weird because I was just thinking about this parable the other day when I was talking with a friend about something, and it came to me when I saw the title of this episode. I saw Janelle Maloney, who was a regular on one of my favorite shows of all time, The West Wing. And there's a very famous West Wing episode about capital punishment in the first season, and in it, a priest played by Carl Malden, famous actor, tells the president, played by Martin Sheen, Jed Bartlett, tells him the story of a man who was lost in a flood, essentially. There's a flood coming, and this man is a very faithful man. He has faith in God, and so he hears a radio report, and somebody asks him, "Father, aren't you going to leave town?" He says, "No, God will take care of me." And then the flood comes up, and the flood waters come up, and he's stranded in his house, and somebody comes by in a boat, says, "Hey, Father, can we get you out of here?" He says, "No, that's fine. God will take care of me." So then a helicopter comes along as the waters continue to rise and say, "Hey, Father, can we get you out?" And he says, "No, God will take care of me." So then the waters rise, and the guy drowns. He gets to heaven, and he meets God, and God says, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And the guy says, "Well, I had faith in you, and you were going to help me. You didn't help me." And he says, "Man, I sent you a weather report, I sent you a boat, and I sent you a helicopter. What more do you want from me?" So it's like this famous parable about paying attention to the signs that are in your life, and looking into the wrong things and looking for the wrong reasons. And I think that's exactly what was happening throughout this episode with Matt. He was seeing these signs, and he was seeing these things that he thought he was supposed to be following, and he was following them. Whether or not he was following them for divine purpose or not, I think that's up for debate. But I definitely think that's the source of the title of the episode. I think it's really good, interesting look at this guy's choices throughout.
Yeah, I like that a lot, and I think it lines up very well with what we see in the episode, that this is a guy who seems to really, he's holding on to his faith in light of this really horrible thing that has happened worldwide. He's at the head of this one-man organization, this newspaper that he keeps passing around, outing people who were taken in the sudden departure as being not as clean or pure as maybe some people think they are. He gets punched in the face for it. He goes through a lot because of the way that he stands in his life these days. And you hear it from his sister, who I guess we now know Nora is his sister. That's kind of a cool reveal. We hear from his sister that he tells her that the sudden departure was a test for what happens after, and she tells him, "Yeah, well, I think you're failing the test." So I think that lines up pretty well with what you just said.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because we can all debate on whether he is actually failing the test, and I think that's a big part of it. I'm not sure if we're supposed to be on Team Matt or not on Team Matt, but at the very least, he looks like he's doing his best. He looks like, he's been tested a lot, and the idea that he represents the clergy at all, it isn't necessarily him per se that people have turned away from. It seems like a lot of people have turned away from the church because the church has been unable to provide any answers. So, and we got that from the guy who was trying to get his baby baptized, and his wife didn't want any part of it. They used to be churchgoers, and they aren't anymore because there really aren't any answers for October 14th, in faith. And it's interesting because, and I don't know what you think about this, Josh. It seems to me like more people would have turned to faith in an instance like that rather than not. But I guess the show here is suggesting that that's not the case.
Right. I think that the show's vision of events, its version of how something like this would play out, is that people would be frustrated and lost and unable to find answers in the situation, and they turn away from everything. It's a shutdown, And I think the other piece of it too is maybe some of these people just think that Reverend Matt's a bit of a jerk. I don't know that people want to go to Reverend Matt's church when he's the one who's going around sending out flyers of, little Judy in town was secretly a prostitute or whatever the hell he's saying about all these people.
Oh,
So
Judy, no.
I know, poor Judy. So I think that might be a piece of it as well, as maybe if there was somebody a little sturdier at the podium, they'd be coming to church more often.
Sure, I think that's definitely part of it.
What do you think of the Reverend Matt character? Before we even dive into the episode beat by beat, Christopher Eccleston plays Reverend Matt. He's one of the former Doctor Who's. He was Destro in G.I. Joe. He was the bad guy in Thor: The Dark World. So this guy is an actor who has been seen before. So Christopher Eccleston is kind of one of those recognizable faces that has been on the leftovers, but so far hasn't had much to do. In the first two episodes of the series, and now he gets his entire episode to himself. What did you think of the performance? What did you think of the character? And how did it align with what your expectations of this guy had been based on what we had seen of him thus far?
Well, like you said, you don't cast a guy like this, right? A guy with this kind of pedigree, and have him just be background material. I do think that it's great that we, in the third episode, diverged so much so that we're really focusing only on one character. And yes, some of our other characters pop up, but I think it's great that really we focus on only this one. What that tells me is this is a show that's trying to say, hey, look, we've got legs. Like, each character in this town that we may have only seen in the background of these first two ensemble episodes, they have stories to tell. They have passions. They have motivations. I think we did an excellent job of seeing that play out with Reverend Matt. I really liked how he was kind of going through his day. We saw he was preaching, and then that somebody came in and attacked him, and he was at the hospital, and he dealt with Kevin. And we're going to get into, I think, the beat by beat, but I really liked how he kind of kept a stiff upper lip throughout it all. And then when he got home at night, at the end of the night, he really tried so hard not to let it go, but he just let a little bit of emotion escape there while he was lying on that cot on his bedroom floor. And I thought that was marvelous. I thought it was a fantastic performance. I thought that it was great to know that we've got supporting characters on the show who can kind of pop out like this and are so compelling. I don't know. What do you think?
Did you miss the Garveys at all?
Yeah, I mean, not really. I missed a little bit of the story of Kevin, right? Because I missed, the whole point of view that we've been focusing on with Kevin, whether or not he's losing his mind, how that goes. But I thought this episode did a nice little subtle job of just keeping the Garvey's story present. We saw the weirdness of his father, leaving that for the Reverend, and we heard just a little subtle things about the Garveys that were just enough to kind of keep us in play. And I don't know, so I thought that was good. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. I thought that frankly, I was kind of relieved that we didn't have to spend an entire episode with those guys, just because we had spent the past 2 hours plus with the Garvey family, and I thought it was a nice change of pace to focus on somebody else. I agree that it was nice to see that there are people in Mapleton worth focusing on outside of Kevin and his family. And I don't know, this episode really, even more than last week, made me very dubious of the Holy Wayne stuff, because Mapleton is interesting enough on its own, and they really are going to have to sell me on Holy Wayne to get that storyline interesting enough to align with what's going on in Mapleton. Like, I feel like there's plenty of stuff that's going on here that all of this Wild West nonsense is really just not doing it for me, even more so in retrospect.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the good news with that storyline is it appears, from where we left Tom specifically, that he's kind of about to go on a little bit of a road show, or some kind of going from place to place and seeing different things. So I think it will be kind of interesting to see different parts of the country, if they are going to do kind of a road movie type thing, like The Road, for example, or any one of these kind of post-event type road shows. If we're going to see different areas of the country, different groups, and Tom's going to be our way into that, I'm okay with that aspect of the story. But I definitely agree that the magical element of Wayne and all that, I am much more dubious as well, as a result of an episode like this, which can be so strictly character-based, and it can be about the character's own interpretations of reality and not necessarily anything magical that may or may not be occurring.
And especially because they really, by the end of this episode, they boost the guilty remnant up. They really, the writers made the guilty remnant much more of a dangerous force, or at least a very even more interesting than they have been, and in more of an antagonizing role than they've been in the past, which says a lot because they've been pretty annoying to deal with for Kevin Garvey and everybody else in town. But the way that this episode ends with them in charge of Matt's church really sets them up as a force to be reckoned with, and I just don't know how that lines up with Holy Wayne, and frankly, I kind of don't care.
Yeah, me neither. I could care less. So I guess the challenge will be to see how the show can make us care. I'm sure they probably recognize that they had a Holy Wayne problem. And keep in mind, and I think you, like me, have not read any of the source material. So they're adapting source material, and I think if they left out entire arcs or characters, like that, that may prove to tie into the story somehow, that it wouldn't make a lot of sense. So I think we may be seeing Wayne at least partially right now, because something major happens with that storyline. But right now, it doesn't seem to matter at all, and it certainly seems like the stuff we want to be focusing on is right there in Mapleton.
Right. Maybe it's something that once the season is over, we can look back and see how important Holy Wayne was. Maybe we can reassess at that point. But right now, boo on Holy Wayne, yay on Reverend Matt, and let's dive into Reverend Matt a little bit in this episode. So when we begin the episode, he is giving a sermon. It's the story of a little boy. He would ask you guys to stop him if they've heard this one, but they have, and he doesn't want to stop. And he's talking about, I don't know, did you get the sense that he's talking about himself, this story about the boy who wishes for more attention once his baby sister is born, and he gets attention in the form of leukemia, and the cancer, it eats him away until he's almost nothing, but he fights it and survives, and he has to make the choice of, was he punished or rewarded? Should he be angry for being made to suffer or grateful for suffering? Did you think that this was a story of Matt, or is he just using this story to preach to the choir? Is it the writers trying to set up an allegory with Matt? What did you think of the story he was telling here?
Yeah, at first I thought it was actually a fantastic homily, like a fantastic sermon, because the whole, will you be angry for being made to suffer or feel better for it? It is a choice that I think the leftovers have to make as well, right? And so I think that you see the guilty remnant, for example, they're making a choice where they feel guilty for being left behind. They don't feel blessed. They don't feel lucky. They don't feel like they deserve something more. They don't feel like they've, been blessed to experience what they have. They feel guilty. It's right there in their name. And so I think they've made that choice to pursue those feelings. And I think Reverend Matt is encouraging people like, hey, it's a crossroads. This happened. This disappearance and departure happened. And like the boy in this story, we can choose to, feel better, feel like we're being punished for something. And I did get the sense that it was about him when he said, and now this little boy asks you for, your prayers for another little girl. And then I was like, oh, he's saying he's the little boy. Okay, I got it. This story's definitely about him. So I thought that was about him. I thought that was a really interesting little backstory about him that we didn't know, obviously, and come to find out later in the episode, of course, that the sister is also somebody we knew. So I think that we got a lot, and we also found out what happened with his parents, the history of the church and their family. We got a lot of backstory about this particular family in this one episode. So I thought this story really neatly and did a good job of setting it up.
Yeah, I agree with that. He goes on, of course, to talk about a little girl who has been in an accident. She's been in a coma for 9 days now. The outcome is undetermined. Her name is Emily, which of course touched me. My wife is named Emily, so I was very upset. And my wife was sleeping in the room and woke up at the sound of her name, and she got very upset at this story. So the Leftovers has touched the Wigler household, if nowhere else tonight. So he's asking everybody to pray. And in walks this guy who's got business on the mind for Matt, and by business I mean fists, and by mind I mean Matt's face. And he just comes in and he wallops Matt. He stuffs the pamphlet in his mouth, the pamphlet that says she sold drugs, and he walks out, and everyone's just horrified, and Matt's just reeling on the ground. Did you get the sense this is not the first time Reverend Matt has gotten his ass kicked for his journalism practices, right?
Definitely not. I mean, he tells Kevin at the hospital, "See you next time." And Kevin is like, "It's like this is his thing." And I mean, there are entire holy orders and sects, sects. I have problems with that word. There are entire holy orders that devote themselves to self-flagellation and beating themselves for what they feel are their sins, to punish themselves. And so I suspect that this is part of his whole complicated apparatus in his church. Like, he feels like this is his calling to make these things clear. And I think in that way, he expects that this punishment will be part of it, and he's okay with it. I mean, you see Kevin come into the hospital and right away says, "You want to press charges, Matt?" And Matt's like, "Nope." Kevin's like, "All right, we're done here." So This is not something that's unfamiliar. And I think that Reverend Matt probably sees this as part of his, his ministry. Like, he's just going to have to deal with. He's going to have to catch a beating every now and then.
Yeah, he calls it an occupational hazard.
Yeah.
Stop pissing people off, and he reasons that these people need to hear the truth, and even says that Kevin's father understood that. What did you take to mean by that? That Kevin's father understood that these people need to hear the truth?
Yeah, and that's really a very good question, and I wondered that too. I mean, Kevin said, "You see how
there is a deep relationship between Reverend Matt and the Garvey family."
Yeah, and Kevin kind of lets go the fact that he says to Reverend Matt, "Hey, I'm living in my dad's house now," and I don't think we had known that he had moved into it. That was his father's house that he'd been living in, literally stepping into his shoes and stepping into his house there. I think we got some sense of it last week when he was talking to his dad about the house, and he said somebody caught the fence on fire and all that. But we got the sense now that there was something deep between Reverend Matt and that family, and why and how. Did I miss something on the previous episodes? Did they set up at all that Kevin's dad had left that peanut butter jar for the Reverend, or did was that not introduced until he was?
The only thing that I caught was in the asylum. Kevin's father, isn't he just like eating peanut butter by the spoonful?
Yeah, he loves peanut butter. This is a peanut butter man.
So this is a peanut butter man. The jury's still out on jelly, but we know he loves his peanut butter. Maybe Nutella as well. We will find out in a future episode, I'm sure. But yeah, I think that this is just like his thing. I don't know what the theme of peanut butter is on the Leftovers. I don't know what the thematic significance of that is. I know a lot of people are allergic to peanuts. Maybe there's something there. Maybe these peanuts are going to cause problems for somebody down the line. I don't know, Antonio. I've got no idea.
Well, we know he went nuts. So I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Not to put too fine a point on it, but I don't know if that's part of it. Choosy moms do choose Jif.
It's true.
It's been Jif peanut butter, so I don't know if there's a choosy moms thing going there. Could have been Peter Pan, could have been Reese's, could have been any kind of peanut butter. I don't know why they picked Jif.
Pan would have worked if Kevin Garvey Sr. He kind of seems like a man child, doesn't want to grow up.
Yeah, and there's a lot of lost boys in town without their kind of things going on. If we get a Rufio appearance, I am all in on the Leftovers forever.
Dude, so, Rufio left us. He departed.
Let's not. That's going to be a very sensitive. I don't want to think about it.
We're not good enough for Rufio. Rufio had to go.
No.
He's with Gary Busey now.
Somebody in Mapleton has the pan sword is all I know. And we're going to find out who, and it will come up, and that'll be fine. No, I really don't know what the connection is between the Garveys, and, I don't know what if Matt's last name is Durst, like Nora, if that was her married name, but what the relationship there is. We saw in the first episode, if you'll remember, and I think they showed it in the previously on, Reverend Matt says to Kevin, like, you're off the hook, and tell your father he's off the hook, too.
Right.
And there's off the hook for what? I don't know. There's not. We don't really know. We get the sense that this accident, or we get the sense that there was some very deep relationship there, and that this money was part of what happened. I think that was owed to him from what happened on October 14th. I think was kind of what we thought there. But yeah, it was weird. What did you think about the clown and the Reverend in the elevator?
I thought that the clown was the smoke monster.
Yeah, they're just popping up there, huh?
Yeah, it's off the island. No, I have no idea what the deal is with the clown. I thought that was very strange. I think it's like that sad clown imagery that everything going on with Matt in this episode is going to go horribly wrong, and Matt almost has like a clownish look to him. Christopher Eccleston, he's a tall, lanky, gangly guy, and I think that there's fan art out there on the internet of Christopher Eccleston painted up like the Joker. I know a lot of people wanted to see him as the Joker once upon a time. So I see I already get kind of sad clown imagery just by looking at Christopher Eccleston. So that's all I could think when I saw that clown on the elevator. It's like, oh, this is going to be a downer of an episode. This is going to be somebody play the sad trombone right now. That's what's about to happen.
Yeah, no doubt. And he said to the clown, I guess you and I are headed to the same place. And I'm like, man, if they end up in the morgue, I am just going to be terrified because I don't want to think about a clown running around a morgue at a hospital. And I was thankful that they ended up, I guess, in what was the children's wing. And I guess that's what he was saying is you and I are going to the children's wing. I suppose. I have no idea what else he meant by that.
Yeah, the last thing that the Leftovers needs is a dead clown. I think that's going to be a bridge too far. That's just too depressing. I don't think any of us could handle that.
Yeah, you kill a clown. That's no good. I mean, it's like the day the music died, right? You don't want that.
Exactly. So he goes down and he goes to visit this girl, Emily, but surprise, Emily's not there. At first, I thought that she was dead, and I was just not surprised by that at all because that's exactly what this show would do, is kill the little girl, thankfully off camera. But no, she's alive. She woke up, and Matt's so pumped up because he's like, well, my congregation, we prayed for her this morning. That's so great. And the guy's like, yeah, well, she woke up last night. And Matt's like, well, sad clown.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not good. Poor Matt. Yeah, it's really not working out for this guy. Maybe what should he have read into that sign? That should he have read in that his prayers did not do anything? Was there, he didn't really have anything to do with this one, right?
No, he didn't. But I mean, I think that I think he was happy with the result. So I don't think he felt too terrible about the fact that he may not have played a part in it. But I think he was really hoping that he had. He just kind of lit up like a Christmas tree almost when he saw that. Hey, wait a minute. So he so desperately wanted it to be because of their prayer that he's telling this random orderly about it, right? So, I felt bad for him that wasn't the case. But he kind of shook it off and just keeps on going.
He keeps on going, and he goes back to his church, and he's so detail-oriented. He's cleaning it. He's fixing the light bulbs. He cleans his own blood off of the ground, and then there's a knock on the door, and it's this guy, Frank McNamara, who has not been in church for a while. He's got his baby. He wants him to be baptized. The man's wife does not seem to be a fan of church these days anymore. And I think this is like the shot in the arm that Matt needs. It's like he gets to be, he gets to do his job. He gets to do what he feels he's been put on earth to do here. And he baptizes the child. And I thought this was a really nice scene. I liked the way it was shot. I thought this was a really unusually warm performance from Christopher Eccleston. As we see throughout the episode, it gets pretty dark. It gets really bleak, just like The Leftovers has been from day one. But Christopher Eccleston, for me, just in my experience with him, and I don't know a ton of his work, but what I do know, he tends to be like the gritty, sour guy, the surly character, and it was nice to get a little bit of warmth from him in this baptism scene.
Yeah, I mean, I actually felt really good for him there, and he says, I'd really like you to, ask your wife to come to services on Sunday. And the guy's like, yeah, that's not happening. And
Right.
he says, well, I thought I'd give it a shot, and I'm like, oh, this poor guy, like he's just trying really hard, he's just doing the best he can. And it seems pretty obvious that I thought during the episode at the time that the guilty remnant were sitting on him, because you saw them standing outside the church looking at him and things like that. And he tells them right around the same time, I've made it this far, I'm not going to turn around now. And that's kind of right after he meets with the baptism and all that. So he's really kind of emboldened by not only the baptism and the fact that the guy came in, but the guy gives him a little bit of info, which is just as good, right? It's
Right.
just as good for
He gives him a
this
clue.
right, and
A
that's all he
clue.
needs.
Yeah, he gets a raging clue, and he finds out about Andrew Sasaski or something like that. And it's this guy who gambled his kids' college savings away. He's just this big jerk. So he goes to the casino, and he wants to find out some info.
Yeah, and he rubs the guy the wrong way, the pit boss or whatever, and that's funny because the guy's like, I can see why your nose is like that.
Yeah,
So
in my notes, I wrote down that line. I think I know what happened to your face, and next to I wrote funny because we finally got a funny line on the leftovers. I was
yeah,
happy
I kind
about
of what
that.
happened to your face. Yeah, exactly. So, that is what anyone would say. This guy's coming on really hard, and just double probably what he needs to. He needs to dial it back a bunch. But something really interesting happens while we're at the casino,
The
which
birds.
is the birds, the pigeons. That's the second time we've seen a pigeon in this episode. The first, when he's doing the sprucing up of the church, he's kind of sweeping a pigeon off of the stoop of the church. And so this is the second time we've seen pigeons in this episode. And this time they're seated on the roulette table, which comes up later. But I don't know. What did you think at this time? Did you think that we were meant to think that these were some kind of sign, or what did you think of seeing the birds in the casino there? Have you ever seen a bird in a casino?
I've seen birds in airports and in malls, so it's not completely unreasonable that there would be birds in casinos. They get in everywhere. These birds, they cannot be trusted. I have a
No, no, they
bird thing
probably.
too. I should put that out there.
I don't like them. I don't trust birds.
I don't trust them. I don't trust them at all. The thing that I really took away from that more than the birds in particular is now I really feel like we got to be tracking animals
I'm thinking the
because
same thing. That's exactly what I wrote down.
we've got dogs are out of control. We've got Hannibal deer that are running around doing who knows what, and now we've got these birds floating around. They're like signs of impending doom or maybe signs of hope. Who knows what they are? But clearly the show is interested in animals as symbolism for what's going on in this world, and I think that a lot of people could write some really compelling theories about this stuff. I don't know that I'm going to be one of them, but I would like to read some theories on the animals in the leftovers. I don't know what to think of it yet, but this is not the last time. It's not the first time we see pigeons in this episode. It's not the last time. So it's definitely something that we got to be keeping an eye on.
Yeah, I like thinking about the case of the deer, right? I mean, that's something where Kevin sees a deer in a woman's yard, which looks fake and may or may not be fake. No one else acknowledges that deer. He then has a dream that he hits a deer. Again, that's a dream, so we don't see the deer. And then, there's another instance where we see the deer possibly, trash his house, and then he meets up with the deer later. And then the BBA shows up, and they see the deer together, and they see the dogs taking it down. This is an instance where we have clearly other characters, in this case, the casino people that we know. We don't have any theories like we do with the BBA, whether they're real or not. We know these are real people, and they're seeing the pigeons. So this isn't something that, Matt is just making up in his head. These are real animals that are existing in the world and that are clearly visible to other people. So the fact that he's seeing them and the way he's seeing them, I mean, if they're meant to symbolize anything, you have to theorize that they may be some sort of divine sign or divine providence. And we'll talk about where we see them in the episode again later on. But it's pretty telling, I think, that that they're popping up and that we're meant to be paying attention to animals for sure.
You mentioned him quickly. Did you miss the BBA as much as I did?
I did. I shed a single solitary tear, and I'm going to have to Google that phrase after this episode of our podcast here, and I'm hoping if I put it in quotes, it will turn up references only to our podcast and nothing else. What do you think my shot is?
Oh my God, I don't want to know what you might find out.
It's a little dangerous. I'm just gonna hit image search. I'm feeling lucky, and we're gonna see what happens.
All right, let's give it
I'm
some luck.
hoping I'm hoping our podcast SEO is really good.
Bet on red 23. Okay, let's move on. So Matt goes back to his place. He starts typing up in his pamphlet. He tries to print things out. He gets ink all over his hands, so his hands are covered in black, which is surprising because he ends up betting on red later on. You would have thought that maybe he would have put that together as a sign to bet on black.
Yeah, and he's clearly not a Wesley Snipes fan because I think Wesley Snipes was it a Passenger 57 or one of those movies where he's very clear that you're supposed to always bet on black.
The only Wesley Snipes one-liner that I care about is "Some mother effers are always trying to ski uphill," which is from Blade, and it's a
Yeah,
great line.
there you go.
So he gets ink all over his hand. He goes outside. He runs into the guilty remnant. He gives them, a box of supplies, and this is what you were talking about before, Antonio, is how he basically says, "I know you have a job to do, but please tell Patty she's wasting her time sending you here. I've made it this far, and I'm not going to turn around now." And this is classic Matt, as we learned throughout this episode, misinterpreting the signs, missing what's really in front of him. These guys aren't interested in recruiting Matt. They want his church.
Yeah, and I got to admit, just like Matt, I misinterpreted that one as
Sure,
well.
yeah, me
So
too.
yeah, it doesn't surprise me that he did, but it makes the ending just that much more of a gut punch. And we'll talk about it some more. But yeah, he misinterpreted this one big time.
So he gets in his car. He finally. I think he accidentally picks up the phone call from the FDR bank.
Yeah, yeah. Damn GPS and Bluetooth. I mean, who hasn't been there, right?
Yeah, just more sad clown Matt. He doesn't know how to use technology, and so he gets boned on the technology, and he has to go to FDR Bank, and he finds out that somebody has an offer on the church, and he hasn't been paying for the church. He's been allowed to keep it until somebody is going to make an offer on it, and they want to put how much? It's like 135,000, right? Is what
Right.
this LLC is offering up, and nobody really knows who this LLC is. So he has until tomorrow, the end of day, to cough up the money, and even if it's just $1 more than this offer, this guy is going to let Matt keep the church. This guy's awesome. This is the nicest banker maybe ever.
Yeah, he's clearly taken a page out of the "It's a Wonderful Life" book, and he's going by the anti-Mr. Potter strategy. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, what's his name? Jim? I think Jim the
Jim
banker.
Lewis or Jim Lewis, yeah.
Yeah, I
Good
love Jimmy
old
Lewis.
good old Jimmy Lewis. I mean, it's the FDR bank, right? So he's open to making a new deal, if you will.
I'm pumped for the Jimmy Lewis flashback episode.
Yeah, can't wait. I can't wait to find out what's making that guy tick and if he lost anyone.
He doesn't seem like it. He probably has everything that he could ever want, and he's just trying to be really nice and be like an angel to everybody else. That's what he
Yeah,
seems like to me.
this show is very pro banker, which is a different strategy to take, I think, in this day and age.
It's great. I like that. So Matt, he goes to pay a visit to somebody he thinks he might be able to get some of this money from, and it turns out to be Nora, the woman who has lost her entire family in the sudden departure, and we saw her hugging it out with Matt in the previous episode, and now we have the explanation. Nora and Matt are brother and sister. What do you think about that? How about
I
that?
want to tee off a little on that, just a little. This is a small town.
See you
I
later.
think I would assume people know each other in this small town. So it's surprising to me that the characters in the last episode, I think it was Jill and Amy, thought that Nora was going to just beat, the Reverend Matt up when she came into contact with him in the street, and she gave him a big hug, and they were very surprised at that. But they should have known that this was brother and sister, right? I mean, I got to think that that's pretty much public information and public knowledge.
They're too busy playing eye choke to pay attention to
Oh,
the
well,
old
that's
people.
true. They just choke the pain away and choke the memories of who knows whom away. So that
Yeah.
maybe that makes some sense. Yeah, it's all about the app.
Yeah, they're choking
The
and
app for that.
cranking into the memories and just forgetting about the adults. There's no they have no interest in what's going on there. They're too busy just iPhone boning each other.
Yes, that may well be what's happening.
Yeah, it's not great. It's very awkward in the social circle here in Mapleton, New York. I'm not a fan. So we find out that Nora and Matt are brother and sister, that they're siblings, and I liked that. I thought that was good. I thought this was a nice little connection, and anything to kind of connect these characters in this small town together I think is good. So now we know Matt is connected to the Garveys. We have that established. Matt is connected to Nora, and their parents died in a fire. and we've seen a whole lot of fire imagery going on this show already. We have to assume that if Matt and Nora are connected, and Matt is connected to the Garveys, that Nora is probably connected to the Garveys as well.
Yeah, and I thought it was really good that we set up the beginning of the episode, right, where Matt tells a story about when his sister was born and how she took attention away from him. And so as a result of her taking that attention away from him, he prayed and very much wanted the attention back on himself. And his suggestion is his prayers were answered by cancer. You don't want the cancer to be the answer. Cancer's not the answer.
No.
So, it's funny because here we have Nora, who is a celebrity in the town because of how much she actually lost, on October 14th. She's getting all the attention. So I wonder how much we're meant to believe that what Father Matt is doing, or Reverend Matt is doing, is in response to how much attention his little baby sister is getting. And is he trying to get some attention on his own, just like he did when he was younger? And I'm not sure if that's what we're meant to believe or if it's just a subtle suggestion, but that really resonated with me, that these two characters of any characters would be related, and that this would be the sister that we heard about earlier in the story.
Yeah, definitely interesting. So he asks her for the money because it's for the family church. She doesn't consider it the family church because the parents didn't leave it to anybody. They just died in a fire, which is a pretty cynical way of looking at it. But she says that she's willing to front him the money to keep the church on one condition: stop making your stupid paper. And he's not really willing to take that deal. He feels that people need to hear the truth. She feels that people need to punch you in the face, Matt. And she thinks that he is really clinging on to some darkness from what she ominously refers to as the accident and the judge. And at this point, we don't know what's going on there. We don't know what this accident she's referring to is. But of course, by the end of the episode, we have a pretty clear picture.
Right, but I thought that did a really good job. I mean, I like that this show, and other shows do this, but I like that this show takes its viewers seriously enough that it respects and recognizes that we'll hear that dialogue, we'll cling on to it and wonder what the accident was, who the judge is, and they may pay it off this week, which they did in this instance, or there may be other straight lines of dialogue like that they don't pay off right away. But I like that they take the audience seriously and respect us enough to know that we're going to be able to connect those dots because we're going to be looking to do so.
She asks him if he knows what happened to her family. Where did they go? What was this event? And he tells her it was a test for what came after. It's a test for what comes now. And she tells him, if this is a test, then I think you may be failing it. Are you with Nora or are you with Matt?
That's a good question. I think I'm probably with neither of them because I think that you have to grade on a curve, and I don't know who's setting the curve because we haven't seen any character in this series who seems to be doing really well with what happened on October 14th. I mean, we have to look at Nora, right?
Except for Jim the banker, who's doing
Except
great.
for Jim the banker. Jim the banker's doing fantastic. I forgot about Jim.
And
he's
frankly,
lovable.
the BBA is doing okay as well.
I mean, he might be. This is a guy who seems to be so well off he can just throw a truck and say, I don't want it anymore. It's like a late model, brand new truck. So, yeah, he may be doing pretty well.
And I get the sense that he kind of likes to shoot dogs. So this is this is the ideal
So this was a boon for him, right? This was a real good deal for him now that he can shoot dogs kind of at will. Like, he was probably always wanting to shoot dogs, and now he's totally into it. So, he's got cover. No, but I mean, think about Nora, right? We saw her knocking the coffee cup off the table last week just because she could. And we saw the position she's in where she has to ask these people who have lost people all these unfortunate questions. And, it isn't clear exactly. She's still not dealing with everything great. She's got remnants of all of the people that, she lost left
guilty
behind in her
remnant.
Perhaps a little guilty remnant. Yes. So, I don't know exactly how well she's doing. She's not going around getting strangers to punch her in the face, but, she's not exactly living the best life either, and we know others are not as well. So I think we have to grade in a curve, and I don't know that either of them are passing and failing. What do you think?
Here's what I think, is that Matt is about to fail horribly at being a good brother. And I also think that this is going to be one of this episode's instances of not being so great. This is a part of the episode that I did not like. So Nora tells Matt that he's not doing any good anymore with his paper. It's not working anymore. It's not making things better, and maybe it's time to let it go. And so Matt takes this opportunity to tell his sister, finally, after all these years, now is the time to do it when he needs money from her, to tell her that her husband was having an affair with the kid's preschool teacher. And he has the receipts. He was very careful. He was paying with cash. It's the one story I'm never going to publish. And Nora cracks. And I don't understand why this has happened. And I don't particularly like this scene. This felt a little on the nose for me. I don't know. I don't know how you felt about it, but I was not a fan of this part of the scene.
Yeah, I mean, I did not. I wrote down, like, what the F is this supposed to do to help your cause, buddy? Like, how did he think that this was more likely to generate the money that he needed? How did he think this was going to sway the transaction in his direction? And I could only surmise that it wasn't about that for him, that he was just being a dick, right? Like, he was just being spiteful and mean and angry and hateful. About somebody that, I mean, maybe they were just doing some innocent finger painting. We don't know.
Right? You never know. Maybe she was just giving him lessons.
Yeah, she was feeding him snack, letting him take a little nap. They were, playing with the farm together. Like, who knows what preschool teachers do? Like, that very well could have been an innocent thing. All he's got is speculation. The poor guy, Doug or whatever his name is, he's not there to defend himself. Yeah, he's not there to defend himself. I mean, Nora's never going to get anything out of this. She's not going to be able to sort anything out. He's gone. So this is a horrible, horrible thing that Matt has done. By revealing this fact, and it's just a shitty thing to do.
Yeah, it's not great. It's not cool, and I think, and what I don't like about it is that if it was him deliberately trying to be a jerk to her, I feel like the episode plays better if the moment where he really flies completely off the rails is when he gets to the casino and bashes the dude's brains in. Like, I feel like that's the moment where he snaps, and up until then, he should be doing what he really believes is right. So if he's being a jerk to her intentionally, that feels out of character with everything else that we see from him in the episode up until the casino. And then if he's not being a jerk to her and he's just a doofus, then I feel like this is like a little too on the nose of Doofy Matt. I feel like we already have Doofy Matt, and I don't think that we need this information to show us just how much of a little bit of a out-of-touch doofus he can be, this guy. I feel like we've got that. I feel like that's established, and I also think that if this, is something that he's been holding back from Nora all of this time, then it's something that's more interesting to reveal to her later. Not in episode 3 and not like this. I feel like this is information he could have withheld at a later time and it would have had a more powerful dramatic impact later on in the series. I just feel like this was a waste of information and kind of a waste of screen time. I did not care for this part of the scene whatsoever.
Yeah, and the only way I can accept it or buy it is on the level where you follow him throughout the episode, right? And he's telling stories about things he's struggled with. Guy punches him in the mouth. He gets up, calls it an occupational hazard, doesn't snap. He's investigating things. He's baptizing people. He's being nice to the guilty remnant. He's doing all these things, but he ends up at the bank, and then he's kind of like, okay, now I'm having a really bad day, and I'm within my 24-hour window here, and I'm really pushed to the end here. And where I like this is only in the next scene, right, which is where he ends up at his house. And we find out, of course, at this moment that his wife is horribly, paralyzed, essentially. I mean, to the point where she can't even speak or move her lips or anything. So, I mean, she can move her eyes, and that's about it. So we see this man who, this is what his life is. Like, this is what his true life is. This is what he has to deal. That's his central issue. And so all of these other things surrounding this central issue in his life are really probably very trying to him. And so it doesn't shock me that he would snap like that at his sister. Once I've seen the scenes after it, it means a little bit more to me on that level because this is a guy who really just emotionally is at the end of his rope with this church thing and probably was very angry at his sister for not stepping up there. But I still think he's just being a dick, and I didn't really like it.
Yeah, same here. So let's talk a little bit about his personal life. He goes home. He has Roxanne, the housekeeper that he can't pay. He has a wife who is, as you said, severely debilitated. She is not doing well. She does not seem to be able to do much of anything, and Matt is caring for her. He bathes her. He gives her a tender kiss goodnight. She's non-responsive. He goes to sleep, and he can't sleep. He tries to, and he just cries and cries and cries. And again, great work on Mr. Eccleston's part. I thought this was a really, really good scene for him.
Yeah, I really like that he was making every effort to kind of keep it in because his wife is what she is, but he didn't want to let her see or hear or in any way perceive that he was really struggling the way he was. And I thought he did a fantastic job with that, of playing, 100% emotion at a 10% level. I thought that was really, really good.
And then he sees a sign. Did you figure out what the sign was? I mean, he's looking at it's God he's looking at, right? And what is it that God is telling him here?
I have no idea. I'm very interested to see what you think. I mean, it
I
just
have no thoughts. I have no
he's
thoughts. All I know is he just gets the plan. It's game time. I know what I got to do.
yeah, he sees a beard on some kind of like stained glass looking thing in his room, and that beard, whatever it is, that beard tells him, "Oh, I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go move a grill and dig up some money."
Yeah, the beard speaks to him, and he decides he needs to get some money, and he's going to gamble it all. He's going to bet it all on red, and he is going to make the money he needs to get the church. So he goes over to Kevin Sr.'s house with the intention of digging up the money, and lo and behold, there's Lori Garvey.
Yeah, just kind of sitting on the swing set, minding her own business.
Yeah, and don't tell the Garveys that she was here. That's all she asks.
Yeah, and I wonder if the guilty remnant knows that she was there.
Yeah, very possible that they don't. So this was, like we talked about before, the Garveys are not super present in this episode. I'm pretty fine with that, especially because we get them in little bits and pieces in this episode like this, with this moment with Lori and Matt meeting behind Kevin Sr.'s house. And I thought that was a pretty cool little touch in terms of building out the mythology of Mapleton a little bit more. I thought that was nice.
Yeah, my question for you is he pulls the that Jif bottle up, and we know, we get the sense that it's from Kevin's dad. The note on it says, "Rev, you deserve this, KG." That's fine. But the note that it's written on is one of Matt's own kind of broadsides, and it's against the judge, who we get some, we know now, when the Nora references is about the accident, it's about the judge, that the judge may have been in fact involved in the accident that hurt, Matt's wife. The judge, this is a screed that was produced seemingly by Matt. So my question for you is, at what time period before the show starts do we think that Kevin's dad went crazy?
Yeah, I have no idea. It seems to me that it's after the departure.
It definitely in my mind is after the departure, and I don't think it's that soon. I don't think it's too far before the show, because I think at one point in episode 1, Kevin corrects somebody and says, "I'm the chief now." He mentions that his father used to be the chief and he went crazy. I mean, this is all like people aren't necessarily used to seeing Kevin as the chief per se. So I think it's kind of more near history than distant history. I think it's more in the last year range than he went crazy right after the event.
Yeah, I agree. Lots of mysteries surrounding the Garvey family and Matt's connection to them. So Matt, he goes to the casino. He says he's going to put all of this money, he wants all this money in chips. The lady says, "What denomination?" And he says, "Doesn't matter." I guess it doesn't matter because he's going to put it all on red, and he is going to jack that jack up. He puts $20,000 on red and turns that into, what is it by the end? 160,000 by the end?
I think it's like 100 and well, it goes 20 to 40, 40 to 80, 80 to 160. So yeah,
I'm good at math. I did
you got
something.
the new math. You made it
That's
work.
great. That's great. And did you? Sorry, guys. Here we go. Did you notice the Lost reference in this scene?
Let
The
me
second
think.
time when he turns the 40,000 to 80,000, it lands on red 23.
Yeah, I was tracking the numbers, and I wondered if there was going to be significance there.
A little bit of significance there. And so as he's getting, all of this awesome luck, or so he seems, this guy saddles up to the table with his girlfriend. And they're like rooting him on and hooting and hollering. And, at this point, I feel like the only way you don't know that these guys are going to mug him in a couple of minutes is if you've never watched a TV show or seen a movie before.
Yeah, exactly. Or never been to a casino and won any money and worried about getting robbed. Or never, known someone with a beard, present company excluded, who is just untrustworthy because they look swarthy. Like, yeah, this is just no good. This guy, straight out of Central
And it's
Casting.
it's like late at night. Like this
Yeah,
is
this is
not
no
good. Like
good.
he's gonna be walking to his car alone.
Yeah,
He's
this is
he's
no
such like
good.
he's an oblivious guy to this type of stuff. It seems like so this guy's getting robbed.
Yeah, no doubt about it, right? And the interesting thing to me is, and we kind of glossed over this, but like he had every opportunity at any point to change his story in this regard. While he's on the way to the casino, he sees the pigeons again sitting on top of the stoplight, and he actually stops almost in the middle of the intersection at this blinking red light, and he keeps going. He has to pick that particular table and not the high rollers room where he may not have run into this guy, because that particular table is the one that the pigeons landed on. So he thinks there's some significance there. So he picks that particular table, and as a result, he runs into this riffraff. He goes outside, and instead of pulling away right away, he's kind of getting his bearings in his car. And I don't know about you, but obviously the way the scene was shot, when we're seeing it from the side, it's so obvious someone's going to come up to the window and knock on it, right?
Right. I thought it was going to be a little more violent immediately. Like I thought that like the guy was just like going to punch through the glass immediately and just drag him out of the car and do something horrible. And I also thought that this guy would get away with it. I thought that Matt was such a sad sack that he wasn't going to be able to hang on to the money. So the big surprise of the scene for me is when Matt like springs to life and tackles the guy and just slams his head into the ground over and over and over again, gets back into the car, does a little bit of a Heisenberg scream after a crazy fistful of nothing back in season 1 of Breaking Bad, and drives off to Love Will Keep Us Together, which was awesome use of music.
Yeah, fantastic. Fantastic. And, they did such a good job with that, because then the next thing he does, right, is he takes down those street signs with the judge's name on them. And, you got the impression that this is the end of maybe a 3-year struggle for this guy. Like, he's finally feeling like things are on the way up. Like, he stood up to a bully. Like, he finally hit back. He took the signs down with the judge's name on them. He's really stepping up. He's got his money. He's going to get control of his church. Everything's coming up great. And then what happens?
And then he gets a rock to the face.
Yeah, yeah. And like the interesting thing about this is the very traditional no good deed goes unpunished, right? I mean, he did not have to do what he did. He stopped his car and got out to take care of the guilty remnant, the people that were hurt by these people in this Jeep. And only because he did that did he get hit in the face with that rock.
Do we suspect that the guilty remnant were the ones throwing the rocks? Do they want to put Matt in the hospital so that they can buy the church, or is that just that's too convenient?
You're brilliant. You've been watching a lot of 24. That's a classic false flag op, if that's what that is.
Yeah.
And maybe so. Like, maybe so. I feel like we've seen those jerks in that Jeep before. Maybe I think we get the idea that the guilty remnant's constantly getting picked on, but a rock, that's pretty intense.
Yeah,
So I thought it
I
was a
don't know.
potato at first.
It's just throwing that out there, but I doubt it. But maybe I wouldn't put anything past these guys at this point. We don't
I was
know.
going to
We really
say,
don't know anything.
it wouldn't surprise me, right? Like this Patty, they did a great job with casting, because she looks a lot more nefarious than we've seen her be thus far, right?
Right.
She looks a lot more intense and dark, and like the kind of person that could really play dirty than we've seen thus far. I will be interested to know what she was, who she was before she became guilty remnant, and that I think is a great story the show can still tell and will tell. So I wouldn't put it past him. I'm with you. I wouldn't put it past him.
Did Matt kill this guy? Let's just go back to that for a second. Did he kill that guy in the parking lot?
I don't see how he could have, and here's why. Um, the woman is still alive, right? And she'll remember this is the guy, who was at the roulette table who did this. So if he killed the guy and it gets reported to the police, I mean, then Matt's going to get arrested right away. I mean, I just don't see how he gets away with it. If the guy's
He
beat up
doesn't. He
pretty
doesn't
bad,
make it like however many days that he's unconscious for without waking up with a handcuff.
that's what I'm thinking. So
Yeah.
if the guy, if the thing that's beat up most in the long term is his pride, and he slinks away with his tail between his legs and doesn't involve the police, then that's how Matt can get away with this. If the guy's dead, though, I got to think they'd have been all over him.
Right. For this guy, just an occupational hazard. If
It's just another
you're
occupational hazard, yeah.
if you go and you mug somebody, then you are inviting yourself to an ass whooping, and you're not allowed to report to the cops about it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's
Yeah.
right.
I think those are the rules. I think those are the rules. All right, so let's go. Matt gets hit in the face, and he has like this crazy fever dream that here's another part of the episode that I don't love. I thought that this was a little bit on the nose and just a little hokey, is this whole fever dream. I think we learned some interesting information here, but I don't necessarily love the way it was presented.
Yeah, the only thing I really liked was the fire. I agree with you on the rest of it. I didn't understand why Lori popped up in there. I thought the "why do you persist" question is a good question about Matt. I thought that, like you said, just on the nose though, especially since it was his wife asking it, and he's been persisting, keeping her in check and doing everything he's doing. I mean, I thought that that was pretty much on the nose there. But I thought the fire imagery was really good. I don't know if we got the sense that he felt responsible for the fire. Did he start the fire? Are we meant to think that it's possible that he started the fire? We saw some scene that I think was meant to replicate him standing outside of his burning house with his sister,
Right.
having survived the fire. And so it makes me wonder, did he start the fire? I don't know. But I think that the fact that it was his hands were on fire, and in that dream he started the fire, he at least feels guilty about it, right? He feels like responsible, maybe because he dealt with cancer and he felt like as a kid, like, I killed my parents. Like maybe he felt like that. I'm not sure that they're suggesting we should actually believe that, but I found that part of it at least interesting. The rest of it, I completely agree with you. Just a little too on the nose and a little too, non-specific, like kind of vague, dreamy kind of stuff that I think really wasn't meant to be interpreted in any way. It was just there. Like Lori being there was the big part to me. I don't understand what the heck was going on there.
So do we not take anything from that? Like we don't take anything out of he like is sleeping with Lori in the vision. We don't think that that happened in real life, maybe?
I mean, are we supposed to think that? That's really what I don't get. I mean, we know that during October 14th, we know that during the moment he was in the car with his wife. We know that Kevin was cleaning out a gutter, quote unquote, at home with somebody that may or may not have been his wife, and I think the strong suggestion would be that it wasn't her, but it could have been. Um, so I don't know that there was any sense that maybe after that they came together. They do share a secret, obviously, in the backyard there. When Matt shows up and says to Lori, like, "Don't tell anybody," and she's like, "I won't tell if you won't tell." So they definitely have that secret, and I don't think that this is meant to tie in that secret. There may be something deeper between them, but I don't know that we've got anything to go on other than that scene.
And one thing that I did like about the dream sequence is that it took us back to the day of the sudden departure. And I thought that was a very strong scene back in the pilot. I thought it was cool to see the other perspective of it from Matt's perspective. Once again, a lost little shout out that we should do here is just like that was one of the beauties of Lost was when they would flash back to Oceanic 815's crash and different perspectives of the crash. Like Locke realizing he can get up and walk around, things like that. I thought that was cool, and I hope that's something that we do get to see a little bit more of as The Leftovers pushes on. I want to see more perspectives on the sudden departure. So I thought that was cool. That was one thing from this dream sequence that I did like.
Yeah, that was fantastic. I completely agree, and the crash is a really memorable moment of that first scene. So to see it from this different perspective, I thought really resonated. We've got the kid there looking for his dad still, so obviously that's yet another perspective that we can see this scene from. And there are probably 3 or 4 more that we can drink in. So I thought all that was really good. I really like knowing that. I like knowing that even though Matt didn't lose anyone directly on October 14th, he lost some family members with Nora, obviously. But even though he didn't lose anyone, he in all essence lost his wife because she just became catatonic in that accident. So, in that respect, he did lose her. And so I thought that was really good to show his personal connection to the events of that day and to events that we'd already seen. And I completely agree with you. I felt strong Lost vibes there, and they made me happy in the feels, so to speak.
I believe that's what the kids say when they're not
Yeah.
choking each other. So
Yes.
Matt wakes up and he is not on fire, and that is a relief. But he does wake up. He's in the hospital. He's got his head bandaged. We get to see Reverend Who's butt. that's a thing. He's wearing nothing underneath his hospital gown, and we get to see his butt. So all right, A plus, good butt. So he puts his clothes on. He needs to get to see Jim Lewis. He needs the nurse to call the FDR bank and talk to Jim Lewis because he needs to get there. He needs to give him the money. Runs back to his car. He still has the cash there. That's great news. At this point, though, once again, are you figuring, this poor schmuck? It's days later. Like
Yeah,
I feel like
I
that
am.
was pretty obvious too.
He asked what time is it and not what day it is, and to me that
Right.
was the most telling part, that it
Yeah.
was not going to be the same day.
Right. Yeah. It's Christmas
Yeah.
Day. Yeah.
Yeah.
He that was not.
Is it still too late? I'd like to
Yeah.
buy a goose.
Yeah. Exactly. So he gets there, and poor Jim Lewis hates breaking the news to him, and he's like, "I called you 17 times, man. I tried, bro." And it's too
I'm
late.
let down. I'm let down. Jim should have gone to the. He should have called the hospitals if he wasn't getting an answer. That's what you do in TV shows. You call the hospitals to find out if the person you're trying to get a hold of didn't show up. But it's Mapleton's got to only have like one or two hospitals, right? Come on, Jim. One or two extra calls, buddy.
Ah, hey. Well, at this point, the only time that Jim Lewis, you can't fault Jim Lewis too much here. First off, the man's a hero. Secondly, he
American hero Jim Lewis.
he tried calling Doctor Who so many times, and Doctor Who just like kept stonewalling him every time he called. And the only time he finally met up with him was when he like accidentally picked up the phone call. So he probably just figures, oh, this schmucko is just avoiding me again. So you can't blame Jim Lewis. You can't. This is not on Jim Lewis. This is on Doctor Who.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, he thought that, well, it's not actually a phone I'm calling. I'm calling some kind of TARDIS or something to reach Doctor Who here, and maybe
I don't
I
really
was
know what a
fooled
TARDIS
all
is.
along.
I'm not a Doctor Who guy. I have to say it's the phone booth thing, right?
Yeah, I had to give a little shout out in case anybody was.
Okay.
I don't really know either, so.
Fair enough. So he finds out that the church has been bought. He sad clowns his way up to the church,
Shambles,
and
right? It's just shambling.
he shambles up, and surprise, surprise, the guilty remnant is moving in. And that I did not see coming. Maybe because I am a fool, but I did not see coming that the guilty remnant had bought out the church. Was that a surprise for you?
It was a surprise until our buddy Jim Lewis kind of was crestfallen when he was like, they already took possession. And he was like, who? And then it was just like, I'm thinking to myself, oh, wait a minute. Like, there's only one they on this show that, is going to, be the kind of they that would be good to introduce in this next scene. And it's got to be the guilty remnant. So I felt like I was shocked until when Jim Lewis was like, yes, and there's one more thing.
Yeah. We had a question in on Twitter from Dave Backer who asked, where did the guilty remnant get all that cash? Yeah, where did they get the scratch to buy up the church? Did they all just like pool their piggy bank money together? I mean, I don't know. Did
Jim,
they stop buying cigarettes for a week?
maybe the scheme is that Patty or whatever has shares of Philip Morris, and so she's founded this whole guilty remnant cult just to increase smoking, so that more cigarettes will be purchased and she can make bank. I mean, maybe that's just the short game that she's playing here. I don't know. The interesting fact is our buddy Jim Lewis did say they paid cash. So I think that our buddy Dave might be onto something on Twitter there in suggesting that there may have been some nefarious source for their money because they paid cash, and it's weird that they had all that cash. We know what Matt had to go through to get his. So I suspect that maybe the guilty remnant went and just bet on a different table on black that birds had landed on. I don't know.
Is there any chance that the guilty remnant is hooked up with Holy Wayne?
I had not considered that until you uttered those very words. I don't think so. What do you think?
I don't think so. It's just like I'm looking for anything, man. I'm
To
looking for
bring
anything.
to bring Wayne into relevance?
Yeah, I'm looking for anything.
Yeah,
Like the only reason I could see it making sense is, that's why he's interested in Tom, but he's really not that interested in Tom. He's more interested in Tom's little girlfriend that Holy Wayne likes to hug and sleep with. So,
yeah.
I don't know.
It's weird. One thing I will say is, so we know that some guilty remnant people, I mentioned that we didn't know what Patty's story was, right? We know what Laurie's story is. We know, I forget Liv Tyler's character's name right off the top of my head, but
I believe it's Meg.
Meg, that's right. We know Meg's story a little bit in that she's a member of the town. We saw one of the other newer pledges if you will, last week, who was making waffles, and we know he was a local missing person as well. But we've seen other guilty remnants pop up, and we don't know their story. One of the things that I picked up on in this episode, I think, I could be crazy, when when Matt is having his flashback, and we didn't really talk about this aspect of his dream, but he's walking up to his parents' church, and it's during the time that I think it was their church and not his, because there's a different priest in the pulpit. The person who lets him in the door is, I believe, one of the ladies who we've seen as a member of the guilty remnant.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah. So we know that she's got some tie-in possibly to the previous church. So we know, we've got some kind of inkling that these members were people of the community. But, one of the burning questions that Kevin asks in the first episode, which was reintroduced and discussed in the previously on in this episode, which is, they didn't exist last year, and now all of a sudden they've got 50 to 60 people. Who are these people? Where did they come from? What are they doing? And so we know they have this, what seems to be a recruit-based strategy. But at their core, are there people who have other purposes? Are there people that are tied into something else? I think it's a very valid observation. I don't see any evidence yet that they're tied in with Wayne, but I think we have evidence that there's parts of the guilty remnant, other than why they're doing what they're doing, that we maybe have more reason to suspect some other things are going on there. And I think the fact that they turn up with $135,000 cash money right away is definitely one of them. Reasons to suspect there may be other things going on there. So I think that we have some more... That's why I like this episode, ultimately, is that there are these little subtle things throughout the episode that aren't Matt, that they're related enough to his story that I think that they advance the plot a little bit in these other areas enough that I'm interested, ready to turn in next week and see what happens next.
Totally. I was just going to say that I think, I ragged on a little bit of the hokiness of this episode. There were two scenes in particular I really was not a big fan of. But overall, I really liked this episode. I think this was the best episode of The Leftovers yet. I still don't love the show, but I'm interested in it, and I like the show, and I think that this was the strongest episode yet. And the reason being that I think they told a really interesting story with one specific character. It was very focused. It was tight. But at the same time, through that character, they raised interesting questions and aspects of Kevin, of Lori Garvey, the guilty remnant in particular, of Nora. So the world of Mapleton does seem like it grew this week, even though we really didn't see a lot of these characters. We just saw them in bits and pieces. It was mostly Matt. And I thought that was pretty cleverly done and well executed. And if the show can keep churning out episodes that are kind of like this, that are a little more focused, stay away from the Wild West. I don't care about the Wild West. I don't think many people care about the Wild West until they really tie that into what's going on in Mapleton. Stay in Mapleton and be focused in Mapleton, and I think that you can come up with a pretty compelling episode. And I think that's my big takeaway from this hour of The Leftovers, is just the more focused they are and the more they really just allow a character to breathe and therefore breathe life into the world that this show takes place in, the better. I think that's the key for this show. I think that this show is going to succeed on episodes like this. This was a really good example of how they should be doing The Leftovers going forward, I think.
I completely agree. And I think that, in a way that isn't hokey in the context of our own thing, I think that this really sampled from some of the best of Lost in terms of an episode that does everything that you just so eloquently put it, and focusing on the narrow world of one character and finding a way to make revelations from that narrow world matter in the world at large that we're dealing with in the context of the series. I think that is some of the best episodes of Lost are the very character-specific ones that are also able to move the ball forward a little bit in terms of what's going on in the A story on the island. And they could take place in a cornfield in the middle of the country. They could take place on a walkabout in Australia. They could take place anywhere. But if they're advancing the story on the island still by giving us more revelations about these characters, so much the better. And like the best kind of Lost flashbacks like that, the crossovers between characters that we know and the character that we're focusing on are some of the most intriguing things. And there's some of the things that make you want to watch more. And I thought, bang up job of the writing on this one in that regard. Structure-wise, this killed it, knocked it out of the park, like you said. And I think that only because they did a couple big ensemble episodes in the first couple episodes, were they able to really focus in their narrow focus something like this that could still pay dividends in that broader world, because we're so exposed to the guilty remnant, we're so exposed to Kevin, we're so exposed to Lori and other things that are happening in the town with Nora last week, that now when we're just kind of moving the ball forward very little on those fronts, and we're seeing the way these things interrelate, there's a lot more intrigue there. So I think they did a bang-up job with that, and like you, I agree, best episode of the series so far.
So I think, Antonio, we should pat ourselves on the back. I think we only had like 3 or 4 Lost references this time. This was pretty good. We set a record. And I think if you guys are not aware, there's a reason why we were able to get through this one without talking too much Lost. We actually just launched a Lost podcast here on postshowrecaps.com last week. It's the Lost Lives podcast. We're going to be doing a podcast on Lost every single week leading up to the 10-year anniversary of the series premiere on September 22nd. It will have been 10 years since Lost premiered, which is crazy to me. I don't know if it's crazy to you, but it's definitely crazy to me. So we are moving into the second episode of the Lost Lives podcast this coming week. That's going to be on Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern. I believe we're getting the same exact roundtable that we had in the first episode back together for round 2. We had a really good time. It was a good conversation with Antonio and myself, plus Joe Garfine of Cancer Gets Lost and Lost 2014, and friend of Rob Has a Podcast and post-show recaps, AJ Mass. Really good conversation. Not going to reveal exactly what we are talking about on Thursday just yet, but I promise you it's going to be a very fun show if you are a Lost fan. And that's going to do it for the Leftovers this week, but post-show recaps is not done for the night if you are watching us live. And if you somehow managed to watch The Strain while also watching the Leftovers, I don't know how you did it. That's impressive. You are better at paying attention to things than I am. I was lucky enough that I got to see the Strain pilot already, so I'm going to be sticking around to talk to our buddy Rob Cesternino about the Strain series premiere. That is from Carlton Cuse, who is one of the masterminds behind Lost, as well as Damon Lindelof of The Leftovers. So Sunday night's a little competitive in the Lost head-to-head category, which I think is kind of interesting going forward. So if you're interested in the Strain, stick around. Or if you're listening to the audio archive, seek us out, find out what we are talking about on The Strain, download that episode. It's going to be very fun, I promise you. And if you made it to the end of this episode of the Leftovers podcast this week, let's give you a hashtag for this week. Let's go with hashtag Reverend Who. If you've made it this far, Reverend Who is the guy we want to hear you talking about. And Antonio and I, as always, want to hear your questions. We want to talk to you about the show, what you liked about the Leftovers this week, what you didn't. I know certainly for myself, and I think Antonio as well, we're still forming our opinions on this show, so we're curious to hear what you guys are thinking as well. You can hit up Antonio on Twitter. He is AC Mazzaro, 2 Z's, 1 R. I am at Round Howard, like Ron Howard, but rounder, and we'll see you next week for another episode of The Leftovers Live here on Post Show Recaps. Thanks, guys, for tuning in, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.